Ever wonder what really happens when the doorbell rings and your pizza arrives? For most of us, it's just a happy moment, the start of a delicious meal. But for the person on the other side of that door, they shift and sometimes take a turn into the truly terrifying. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the late-night delivery run. These aren't just spooky tales. They're real experiences from drivers who face something far more sinister than a customer without tip money. We've scoured the internet, digging through forums and talking to real drivers to bring you 5 true pizza delivery horror stories that will make you think twice the next time you order in. So lock your doors, dim the lights, and let's get into it. Our first story comes from a driver named Mark, who was working for a popular pizza chain in a quiet suburban town. It was a Tuesday night, slower than usual, and around 10 p.m., an order came in for a house at the very edge of his delivery zone. The address was on a long, unlit country road, with houses spaced far apart. The note on the order just said, "Leave on porch, cash under the mat." A little weird, but not unheard of. Mark found the house, a dark 2-story home with no lights on inside. He grabbed the pizza and the soda, walked up the creaky wooden steps, and lifted the doormat. Sure enough, there was a $20 bill, just enough for the order. He placed the pizza down, turned to leave, and that's when he heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from inside the house, right by the door. He froze. The scratching stopped, and then a muffled voice, a man's voice, whispered, "Is he gone yet?" Mark didn't wait to hear the answer. He bolted back to his car, heart pounding, and sped away, watching the dark house shrink in his rearview mirror. He never found out who was inside or what they wanted, but he quit that job a week later. The thought of what might have happened if he'd knocked still gives him chills. Next up, we have a story from a driver in a bustling city. Let's call her Chloe. Chloe was used to sketchy apartment buildings and late-night characters. It was part of the job. One rainy Saturday night, she got a delivery to a massive maze-like apartment complex she'd never been to before. The order was for apartment 13B. She found the building, buzzed the apartment, and a man's voice immediately buzzed her in without a word. The elevator was out of order, so she started the long climb up 13 flights of stairs. The hallways were eerily quiet and dimly lit. When she finally reached the 13th floor, she couldn't find apartment B. It was 13A, 13C, 13D, but number 13B. Confused, she walked the length of the hallway and back again. Nothing. She called the customer's number. It went straight to a disconnected tone. Annoyed and a little spooked, she decided to head back down. As she reached the stairwell, she heard a door creak open behind her. She glanced back and saw a sliver of light coming from a previously unmarked door between 13A and 13C. A hand, pale and thin, slowly reached out and placed a small, creepy-looking doll on the floor before pulling back and shutting the door. Chloe didn't even scream. She just ran. She sprinted down all 13 flights of stairs, burst out into the rain, and didn't stop until she was safely locked in her car. To this day, she has no idea who was in that hidden apartment or why they lured her up there. Our third story takes us to a small college town and a driver named Ben. It was the end of the semester and students were either celebrating or cramming for finals. An order came in for a fraternity house famous for its wild parties. Ben had delivered there before and expected the usual chaos. When he arrived, though, the house was dark and silent. He thought maybe he had the wrong night. He walked up to the front door with the 5 large pizzas and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door creaked open just a crack. A young man peered out, his eyes wide with fear. "You have to get out of here," he whispered frantically. "Just leave the pizzas and go, now." Before Ben could ask what was wrong, he heard a loud crash from inside, followed by shouting. The guy at the door flinched, shoved a handful of cash into Ben's hand, and slammed the door shut. As Ben hurried back to his car, he saw movement in the upstairs windows. Figures were running back and forth, and the shadows looked wrong, not quite human. He didn't stick around to figure out what kind of party they were having. The money was more than enough for the pizzas and a generous tip, but Ben requested his manager never send him back to that address again. This next story is particularly chilling and comes from a Reddit forum for delivery drivers. A driver was making his last delivery of the night to a remote farmhouse. The instructions were simple. Come to the back door. As he drove up the long gravel driveway, a sense of dread washed over him. The place just felt off. He parked, grabbed the food, and walked around to the back of the house. The back porch light was on, illuminating an old wooden door. He knocked. A woman who looked to be in her late 60s answered the door. She smiled kindly, but her eyes looked terrified. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She paid him in exact change and took the pizza. As he turned to leave, she grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Please," she whispered, her eyes pleading, "don't go. He won't let me leave. He watches me." Just then, a deep voice called from inside the house. "Martha, who is that? Get back in here." The woman's face went pale. She let go of his arm, gave him one last desperate look, and shut the door. The driver stood frozen for a second, then ran to his car and called the police. He explained what happened and gave them the address. He never heard what the outcome was, but he hopes that woman got the help she so clearly needed. It's a terrifying reminder that sometimes a pizza delivery can be someone's only link to the outside world. For our final story, we have an experience that blurs the line between creepy and supernatural. A driver named Jessica was working a late shift on a foggy autumn night. She got an order for an old historic part of town, full of Victorian houses. The address led her to a large, beautiful home that looked like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. The lights were on, so she went up to the door and rang the bell. A moment later, a little girl, no older than 8, opened the door. She was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned nightgown. "Is your mom or dad home?" Jessica asked, smiling. The little girl just stared at her blankly and pointed to a small table in the entryway. "Money's there," she said in a flat, emotionless voice. Jessica saw the cash on the table, left the pizza, and said goodnight. The girl just continued to stare as she closed the door. The whole interaction was strange, but Jessica brushed it off. The next day, out of curiosity, she mentioned the weird delivery to a coworker who had grown up in the town. When she described the house and the little girl, her coworker's face went white. "That house has been empty for 50 years, he said. These stories are a stark reminder to be kind, be safe, and maybe tip a little extra next time you order in. You never know what they might have gone through to get that pizza to your door. If you have a creepy delivery story of your own, share it with us in the comments below. We'd love to read them. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories. Stay safe out there.